Welcome to the Process Breakdown Podcast, where we talk about streamlining and scaling operations of your company, getting rid of bottlenecks, and giving your employees all the information they need to be successful at their jobs. Now, let's get started with the show.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, host of the Process Breakdown Podcast, where we talk about streamlining and scaling operations of your company, getting rid of bottlenecks, and giving your staff everything they need to be successful at their job. Before I introduce today's guest, Stephanie Chavez of Zen Media, this episode is brought to you by SweetProcess. Stephanie, see if you can relate to this. Have you had team members ask you the same questions over and over again, and it may be the 10th time you spent explaining it? Well, I take personal responsibility for that. That's my fault, right? There is a better way. There is a solution. SweetProcess is actually a software that makes it drop dead easy to train and onboard new staff and save time with existing staff. And I was talking to one of the founders, Owen. Not only do universities, banks, hospitals, and software companies use them, but I discovered that first responder government agencies use them in life or death situations to run their operations. I'm like, well, I guess it's good enough for me. So you can use SweetProcess to document all the repetitive tasks that eat up your precious time so you can focus on growing your team. And you could sign up for a free 14-day trial. No credit card is required. Go to sweetprocess.com. That's sweet like candy, SWEET process.com. Today, Stephanie Chavez is the Global Chief Marketing Officer of Zen Media, and she's going to talk about systems. She's going to talk about the SAM method. She's going to talk about some cool successes they've had. Stephanie, thanks for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me. Nice to be here, Jeremy.
I want to start off with just talk a little about what Zen Media does.
Sure. Zen Media is a PR and marketing firm. We specialize in the tech vertical. We can, of course, help anyone, but we have found a really good niche for ourselves in the tech vertical. Basically, we turn a brand into a tech titan, if you will. Tech seems to be really having what we call a moment at this time, whether it's fintech, work tech, IT companies, you name it, medical tech. It's all really having a moment right now. So we help companies leverage those moments. And so generally we start with PR first and get that rolling, get them some amplification, get some awareness out there, but we don't stop there. From there, we actually then continue through different strategic initiatives, keeping that momentum going. Because there's nothing worse than, you spend all this time, effort, and actually money, to get in a Wall Street Journal or a Forbes piece or what have you, and then what? So we take the and then what, and then keep it going and keep that awareness and amplification going.
What does and then what look like?
And then what? It depends on the company. It depends on their product. It could be a product launch. It could be, a new round of funding. But whether it's through paid ads, and there's different types of paid ad campaigns, waterfall methods, consumption methods, email marketing. It could be social media, obviously. But it could be a podcast and continuing on, maybe getting some thought leadership for the CEO or whoever you want the face of the company to be, but just really continuing to ride that wave, if you will.
Yeah. So just someone, if someone reaches the pinnacle, they get on Good Morning America or they get in the Wall Street Journal, there is more that you can do and amplification. And, researching the company, you have something called the SAM method. I'd love for you to talk about that.
Sure. Well, the SAM method is something we use to, number one, we have to get the story out there, right? And then we just talked about the amplification. So you get the story, you get the Wall Street Journal or the Forbes or Inc. pieces. That's great. That's the story. And then we have to amplify it. So that's that taking the and then what and continuing to move it forward through various initiatives to keep it in, top of mind, keep that awareness going. And then we measure. You always have to measure no matter what you're doing to see, what angles people are responding to. Are they responding positively, negatively, neutral? Well, we want to really amp up that positive reception. And so measuring and then consistently adapting based on what the numbers tell you is really powerful.
And I love to hear, you've worked with companies like, if you've heard of them, Dippin' Dots, which my daughter insisted she needed at her birthday party, and One Dine, and many other companies. What did you do with One Dine?
One Dine is a really interesting example. So One Dine is a restaurant technology startup in Plano, Texas. And they were really trying to push the contactless experience even before COVID. So we helped.
They were ahead of their times.
They were. So in January-ish of last year, we did a big PR campaign, got a lot of awareness to attract, the purpose of that campaign was to attract investors. So we were able to help them secure their Series A funding. And from there, we basically became their marketing department. And from there, we started rolling down a certain path, and then COVID hit, and then they had to pivot their product a little bit in order to make it work, not only for the on-premise in the dining room, but now since most dining rooms were closed, they had to figure out how to make it work for what we call off-premise. So in the parking lot, drive-throughs, things like that. And so they had to quickly pivot. We had to pivot all of our messaging because now we had a different focus, right? Which was the off-premise part. And so we did a huge PR campaign around that, letting restaurants know, that this was available. And we were one of the first contactless to be able to pivot and go contactless. Now they're a dime a dozen. But we actually gave it away for free to the restaurants in order to try and help them survive the pandemic. So a lot of that investment dollars that we helped raise at the Series A went to actually help restaurants survive. And so now we're at the point now to where we're pivoting back kind of to where we were before the pandemic, focusing on on-premise in dining, ordering, and payment experience. And during the pandemic, we got them, we did a huge campaign. We did several series of campaigns, but on one, we had 44 hits and huge press hits in 30 days. We had over 2 million video views. We signed up 1,500 new restaurants. So it was quite an interesting
That's
time.
amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
I love it.
Thank you.
So how did you discover, I know you're very systems oriented over there and you have a lot of moving pieces with all the things you do for your clients. How did you discover SweetProcess?
SweetProcess was actually, there's a friend of mine his name is Anthony Coppledge. I connected with him on LinkedIn, and I took a class that he did. It was just a free class for marketers, kind of a chit chat, where he talked about processes. And so as the CMO, I came back. I was with Zen Media before. I was the first employee, helped build the company for 5 years, and then left and then came back last year. And so that was one of the first things I wanted to do, was implement a more sound, systematized process. We had processes, but there was no really one place that you
could like a portal of some sort.
Yeah, like Google Docs here, and Google Doc, and everyone had their own on their drive, and so it was somewhat disorganized. And so we have a really large initiative the next couple of years to really expand our business, and you can't do that unless you scale. So he was talking about SweetProcess, Anthony did, and I thought, well, I'm going to check that out. And it's been really wonderful because I have each department go through, and we have a list of all the things that they do that are, repeatable. And we meet each month so that I can make sure, okay, what did you put in this month? Let's run through it, make sure it makes sense to everyone. And then, what is it that you're going to be doing next month? I have a minimum of two processes that go in each month so that we can continue to slowly build. Because obviously it does take time away from, your daily work, and people think, oh man, got to do my processes, but it saves you so much time.
Yeah.
Like, I'll give you an example. When we hire new interns or when we hire new employees, I have a standard letter that I send. I link them to a whole bunch of the SweetProcess setups that we have. And I just send them the email, link it, and say, watch all these, go through these processes. And that's the very first part of their onboarding process. So
that's amazing. Yeah. Because in the beginning, you have to spend the time to put it in there. But after that, It saves you a ton of time. How else? So it saves time with onboarding and training. What else does it help you save time with?
I would say it helps from a consistency perspective, because everyone might be doing something a little bit differently. And I think it's really hard to really scale and be able to, just think about McDonald's. If every franchise was making their hamburgers a little bit different, it wouldn't be McDonald's, right? Because you couldn't expect the same thing every time. And so I think by having this, being able to produce the same hamburger each time, whether you're doing a social post, there's a flow, there's a series, there's a workflow, and everyone being on the same page is really going to make a much more efficient and predictable product outcome.
That's a great example, Stephanie, because we don't think of it like that. We walk in and we walk into a franchise, we expect the food's going to be the same in Texas as it is when I drive through Chicago. And it is, but for most of our businesses, we need to have a repeatable, predictable process to have that product outcome. And it sounds like that's what it's helped do. So onboarding, training, consistency of product, anything else that it helps that you find as a big impact?
I think sometimes, people forget, or, so it's nice to have a refresher. People kind of get stuck in their own ways. Maybe they watched it first and then they kind of gone off. And as time has gone on, they've developed their own habits, but you can always redirect them and say, hey, you go watch that process again on XYZ, because we really need to all be, doing the same thing. So just, retraining as well, making sure everyone's staying on the same page.
What were you, I'm curious, Stephanie, was there a breaking point where you're like, we need to get something? Or was it just a slow creep? Because you watched that webinar, you saw him talk about SweetProcess. Was there any breaking point? Because it is somewhat of an undertaking to implement anything new to the business.
I think just coming on board myself and, as CMO, my first job was to really dig in to see what is it that we're doing? How are we operating? Where could we make some efficiencies? And then that to me was the very first thing that came to mind was, even though we were always producing great product and doing a great job for our clients, that wasn't debatable. What was debatable was the how and how can we streamline? And so that was really one of the first things that I noticed is like, okay, people are doing things and they're doing them well, but there's no hub to go to and to send people to. What happens if we have a copywriting team? What happens if one of them is out or sick or something? Every client is a little bit different. The way you research their content topics and their hashtags and whatnot, they're all different. So I had them make a process for each one in SweetProcess so that if Brandy happened to be out, that Natalie, could easily pick up, understand, and keep moving forward so that there's no gap in the.
That makes sense. Yeah, the efficiency and streamlining is what you were looking to do. What were the common questions you had in the beginning? So you heard Anthony talk, and when you first were looking into it, what were the common questions you had? Were you skeptical about anything?
Well, since the recommendation came from him, I felt confident that, he knows what he's talking about. He does this for IBM, so clearly he's done this for years and years, so I trusted his recommendation. But honestly, I hadn't seen anything like this before. I had looked at other software platforms in hopes of doing this, but it wasn't really the right match, if you will. And so I was a little lost in my journey. But then again, when Anthony mentioned it, I went to it and I was like, yes, this is exactly what we need. And so we've just slowly been building onto it as we go.
How has it changed your typical day?
From a typical day standpoint, mine, for instance, I don't think my particular days changed, but I know for the team, the team is quickly able to see, I need to do hashtag research. Where was those places that I went to? And, so they refer to it a lot because everything is already in there. All of the tools that we use are in there. We, videos, which I think are super powerful to walk people through certain steps. So for the team, it has made things much easier because they know they can just quickly refer back. And that's where it was. Okay, that's what I need. Or that was the website that I used to research that.
There's always a place they can go to get their questions answered, and they may not have to come to you with those things.
Exactly.
What's, Stephanie, the next big goal for Zen Media?
Increasing our sales. We're on a big growth project right now. We're doing a lot of outbound sales, which again, that needs processes as well. Having all of your sales team performing and using the same metrics, the same methodology so that you can measure. Because one thing that if you don't have a process, and sort of like touching back on what we talked about earlier, if they're all doing their own thing, then you can't really measure what's working and what's not. And so from our sales development perspective, I think it's really important, because if each person's doing the same thing, then you'll be able to see the results, and if this person over here this salesperson is having really good success, but this one may not be over here, then if they're using the same processes, then that's not a process problem, that's a people problem. So I think that really helps in that respect as well.
Steph, I have one last question. Before I ask it, I want to tell people they could check out zenmedia.com. It's such a good name. Check out what they do. Check out the SAM method. And if you have needs of PR and then beyond PR, because they do a lot of different things, from the paid ads, the content marketing, to a lot of different aspects to help your business grow, then check out zenmedia.com and check out more episodes of the podcast and check out SweetProcess. The last question, Stephanie, I have is, what's the very next step? Someone's listening to this. This sounds great, Stephanie. I need to streamline things. I need to create better onboarding, training, consistency, efficiency, streamlining. What's the next step people should take to start to streamline their operations?
Sure. Well, get SweetProcess. It's definitely a great tool for that. Like I said, I did some research before, and none of the platforms really met the requirements that I was looking for until, Anthony mentioned it and I stumbled across it and I was like, oh, this is great. But then you really have to work with your team. And again, they're not going to like it, but I promise you, it will turn around and be a much big benefit later on. And they'll see that quickly. But have them write out, every step that they do, just say, what is it that you do every day that is repeatable? And it's just like, for instance, we have a new designer coming on board. Well, our current lead designer, she has a certain way that she sets up in our task management system. She numbers the task, and then she ties that to the Google Drive and numbers the Google Drive folder. Like, she has a certain way that she saves her files and ties them from the Basecamp to the Google Drive. And so that should be in there. It's something that you do all the time. And even if it's not all the time, the one-offs, like I said, for the clients, the way you research them, there's just a myriad of things, but start with the repeatable, the small things, and it may seem like, saving a file, really, do I have to? Yes, do it, because you want everyone else who comes on your team to save it the same way, so that if Kim happens to be out, I'll know how to go find the file that Sarah saved, so.
I love it, Stephanie, because it doesn't get lost in anyone's head. And if someone has a particular way, it doesn't get lost with that person. And as simple as saving a file in a certain name, then other people can find it. We don't realize that one thing could have a ripple effect on someone spending a half hour trying to find something.
Huge, yes. So, and again, what I was doing was every week, when we first started, I kind of slacked off a little bit. I need to get back on it. But every week we had a process meeting, and I would make them do 2 per week. And so I'd come, and we'd meet and hold each other accountable. What process did you do today? What are the 2 that you want to show us? And I would have each team lead go through and do that. So,
that's great.
Yeah.
So it doesn't get overwhelming for everyone, and everyone can see what everyone else is doing in case they need something. So everyone's on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. Everyone check out zenmedia.com, SweetProcess, check out more episodes of the podcast. Stephanie, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you for having me, Jeremy.
Thanks for listening to the Process Breakdown Podcast. Before you go, quick question. Do you want a tool that makes it easy to document processes, procedures, and/or policies for your company so that your employees have all the information they need to be successful at their job? If yes, sign up for a free 14-day trial of SweetProcess. No credit card is required to sign up. Go to sweetprocess.com, sweet like candy, and process like process.com. Go now to sweetprocess.com and sign up for your risk-free 14-day trial.
Hi, this is Owen, the CEO and co-founder here at SweetProcess. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast interview, actually, you know what I want you to do? Go ahead and leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. That way we get more people aware of the good stuff that you get here on this podcast. Again, go on to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review. Looking forward to reading your review. Have a good day.